We have been talking about complex forms. In this video, we will begin talking about how to configure them. As a reminder, complex form is a label for something that is built up out of other entries in Flex. Now, in regular lexicography terms, normally these are referred to as subentries. However, in Flex, we're using subentry to describe how it is formatted. We're using the term complex form to encompass more than what traditional lexicography describes with subentry. Here, complex form is referring to the kind of entry it is, and subentry is one of the ways it can be formatted. But the important thing is that complex forms can be formatted in many different ways. Again, in lexicography, subentry often refers just to something that's a derivation. In Flex, it refers to anything that's built up out of other entries, so that includes a derivation or a contraction or a phrase or a saying or a phrasal verb, a multi-word expression. So complex form refers to anything that's built up out of other entries, and subentry is one of the ways that it can be formatted. Now, in this dictionary view, we have the subentry analysis here that is a derivation of analyze. And at this point, it is being formatted as a subentry, which means that it is embedded in the entry for its parent entry. When it's embedded, often it starts on a new line. Here it's indented. Now, that's not always the case. And remember, a subentry can include all the things that an entry has normally. Now, because it's embedded in its parent entry, one has to look alphabetically according to the parent entry. And if the two words start with letters that are far apart in the alphabet, it may be hard to find. Now, it's because of that that we also display it as a minor entry. And so up here we can see the minor entry for analysis. Now remember, a minor entry is an abbreviated entry. It means that it's smaller than usual. It mainly serves as a pointer. It exists in a certain place so you can find it alphabetically, but normally the only information it includes is enough information to point you where to go to find the rest of the information. That's the purpose of a minor entry, whether the minor entry is being used for a variant or for a complex form. And so here we can see that the information of analysis is being displayed both as a subentry and as a minor entry. Now, within the Flex database, these are not two separate entries. It's a single entry being displayed in two places. So how do we configure this? Because we've got a lot going on here between the minor entry and the subentry, and we've talked about other ways to display it as well. So let's go to the Configure Dictionary dialog. There's an additional way to get there that we may not have demonstrated yet. In this menu, we can choose Configure Dictionary, and we will get to the rest of that menu later. So in the configuration tree, we have mainly been working in the main entry node, and below it are all of the nodes that relate to a main entry. But notice here that down at the bottom, at the same level as main entry, we have two nodes that are called minor entry. The bottom node, minor entry, is for configuring entries that are of the variant type. And we can tell that because over here we have an options list that shows all the variant type possibilities. And so any entry that is of the type variant will present itself to be formatted by means of what's under this node. Now there's another minor entry node, and this minor entry node is for formatting entries of the type complex form. And we can tell that because here we can see all the complex form types, and we can pick and choose which should be displayed or not. And so any entry that is a complex form will present its information to be displayed under this minor entry node. So that's where the minor entry gets configured. But what about the sub-entry version of it? Because keep in mind there's a minor entry version and a sub-entry version, and there can be other versions as well. So if you want, I could show you and you would have to remember that, but let me show you how to figure out where it's configured. And that's a more useful tool. So here is the sub-entry, and if I'm looking at this and I say I want to configure it differently, I can right-click on some part of that sub-entry, and then I get a menu option to configure the dictionary view, and this will take me to the correct node. So you can see it has landed me on head word underneath sub-entries. Now, this config tree has a lot of nodes in it, and it's fairly complex, and I'm just looking at a small part of it. So to get my context, let me scroll up. So on the main entry node, one of the children is sub-entries. And so that's where I have come. And again, I can use the yellow highlight. You can see that shows me the head word of the sub-entry. Now, notice that many of these fields are the same as the fields in main entry, but they're configured separately, so it's really important to know where you are. And so if I were to untick head word, then that head word goes away, but not this big main one. Now let me bring it back. Now in the main entry, I could untick that head word, and that head word goes away, but not the head word of the sub-entry. And so you're allowed to configure them separately. And so sometimes you really want to configure them separately. There's other times when you may think that you're configuring things at both levels and you can't understand why it's not changing at the other level. So remember, if you want to do the same thing for a field at the main entry as well as the sub-entry level, you need to configure it in both places. So that's the sub-entry. Let me collapse this to get more context. So again, under the main entry node, there's all of the regular fields, and then at the bottom is a node for sub-entries with a lot more information under that. And then we have the two minor entry nodes, and the first one is for the complex forms. And so a complex form entry presents its information to be formatted as a minor entry and as a sub-entry. And later we'll talk about how it can be formatted as a reference. And just as a preview of what's coming up, sometimes people want complex forms formatted as a main entry. Now, in what we're doing right now, that's not possible, but there's a different way that that's possible. So again, this is 4 different ways that a complex form can be displayed. The most basic way is a sub-entry, and also as a minor entry. It can also be a reference, and then under certain circumstances, it could be formatted as a main entry. So that's an orientation to the structure and how that relates to the dictionary preview.